Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. I'm Tamera Loerzel, and with me is my partner, Jennifer Wilson. We are glad to be with you today. We were just saying this hot, last Monday of August. So we hope you're enjoying the tail end of summer here. And we thought as we're entering fall and, each of our seasons, I guess, that one of the things I know we're doing on the HR side and as a firm is driving our initiatives forward and maybe picking some initiatives for the next quarter or trimester. So we thought we would take the time today to talk about some change management strategies and communication ideas to help bring people along faster, more effectively on this change journey that we're on. And, what can we do to meet people where they're at, yet bring them along? And then what kind of communications should we be considering? And, bottom line is more than we think. I think that's probably what I would say is more than we want, more than we think is needed. So we'll talk about communication as well. And as leaders, Jen and I talk about it, Convergence Coaching. That's what we are, as change agents, and we want to work with change-ready firms and leaders and operations professionals, like the HR leaders that we get to work with. And we know that that's one of the probably biggest jobs or roles, if you will, that we have, is how do we bring people along on our change? And I think, we don't always stop to think about it as change and apply these change management strategies. We're just going to go implement a new HR system, or we're going to have new benefits, or we're going to have a new comp system or a new bonus structure. And all of that is change. And we have to talk about, where do we need to be coming from to bring our people along and at all levels, consider all of our different stakeholders. So I think that's why we're doing it. Jen, is there anything you would say from a setup perspective that you would add to that?
Yeah, I just think, Tamera, that we don't realize that we sometimes slow down change adoption with the way that we implement the change. That it's not so much, is this a good change or a bad change, or is this, should I jump on or not? It's more like, wow, this feels like I have so many questions. There's so much unanswered. I've heard objections from other people. No one's responding to them, or nobody has a good response, or I brought up something and it was so clear no one had ever thought of it before. It scared me. And there's all this stuff we do in the change management process that can actually slow down change when we're super irritated that it's not going faster. And so Tamera and I just want us all to be 100% responsible for our ability to slow down the beginning part of change, to do a little bit more strategy, a little bit more thinking, a little bit more preparation, and a lot more communication in order to speed up change adoption and get us over the change curve as fast as possible. And I think sometimes we're so busy being fast at the front, then we trip all over ourselves and slow down the change adoption by the lack of prep.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's, maybe a good place to kind of dive in here, is to just realize when we have a change initiative that people are at different places on the change adoption curve. And we've got our innovators and early adopters who are like, we're not changing fast enough. And you know who those people, you might be one of them, and you know who those people are in your firm, right? And so, yeah, Jen's the innovator, I'm early adopter. So we link arms pretty fast. And but some of our team is maybe not the same, and maybe our clients are not the same. And so we just need to say, where are people at? And then how do we get buy-in, and what kind of questions and objections are they going to have? And what are the messages to bring each of them along? And when we're planning for change, so Jen, you talked about planning for change. If we talk about the planning stage, we would include, for sure, some innovators and early adopters, but we would also include some maybe on the back end, or at least one or two on the back end of that change adoption curve, the late majority, and identify, what their concerns are, what their fears are. First of all, it could help us prevent making mistakes or uh-ohs or things that they're worrying about, or them like digging their feet in the sand, or, sitting their butt down and grabbing on and saying, no, we're not doing that, and stalling us. But we can handle their objections, hopefully be informed by them in our plans, and then it can help us with our communications when we're ready to launch and through the change process. And so when we think about, planning, we have to think about whose input should we be getting, how do we get buy-in along the way, and we would get a sampling. And I think sometimes we might resist those people that are not change ready, and we think that's a mistake. We understand why we might want to do that or inkling to do that, but we think that's a mistake, and we need to bring them along just as much as possible. And it's very valuable when we do.
Yeah, I think we even call them sometimes detractors, and we might go off in secret and talk about the change and purposefully not have them there because they'll just take us off track and they'll make us not want to do it or whatever. And Tamara's right. They have objections, concerns, fears, doubts, uncertainties. We need to hear them. We need to understand them. We can't say, I already know them, which I know some of us want to say. We need to hear today's concerns, today's fears, uncertainties, and doubts. We need to plan to address them. I agree 100%. And I think as transparent as we could be and as inclusive as our change committee can be, the better. The other thing is when people come along on the journey, first of all, one thing about a change journey is I might be the innovator and I think I know what the change is going to be and I know exactly how it's going to work and I know why we should do it and let's just do it. And I want it to be exactly like I thought of it, but that's not how change works. It's a collaborative process. There's innovation, there's refinement. Other people have to put their stamp and their thumbprints on it. That's how we get something people will buy. And so the detractors can come in and help, like make change to the change. They can make it smarter and better and more intelligent. And maybe we don't do exactly what they said, but at least we could create objection handling techniques around what they raised or whatever it is. They'll serve a really important purpose. The last purpose they'll serve is standing up and saying, I endorse the change, when other people that are like them will say, oh, well, man, she wants to do this thing, or she was on that change committee and I know she thinks like I do and she's going to do it, that maybe I should. And so they can become a role model for the people on the back end of the change curve. The other thing about change, just, I really, really want us to get that change is a science. It has methodology and it has process and it can be replicated. Change adoption can be replicated. You can get good at driving change. And change is about influence and inspiration. And it's about causing people to jump across some little chasm, jump a ditch, let's say, over to the new place where the changes happen, and to trust you in making that jump. It's like a trust fall, except for it's a trust jump. And so we need to always be thinking, man, I need to run change science. I need to understand it. And I need to influence and inspire. And I need to encourage people. Like when they're standing there objecting to your change and they're negative about it and all that stuff, you could be like, I don't like them. Or, like you could be just like, they're not my friend or something. But instead, if you look at them like a scared person on the other side of a ditch that you need to come over to your side, then just try to figure out how. I'm not going to try to manipulate them over. I'm not going to lie to them to get them over. I'm not going to inflate my claims of fantasticness about what it's like over here, but I am going to try to encourage them. So let's think about that as change agents. I'm going to apply change science and I'm going to be an encourager instead of like a make wrong, you're not in the change club kind of a person. We don't want to be that. That's not inspiring and it doesn't make anybody jump.
Hands on hips, finger pointing, like none of that allowed, right?
Or like eye rolling, you're not over here yet. None of that. None of that. That's not allowed. And it's hard. It's hard when you do know how crucial the change is and you're feeling this resistance. It is hard.
Yeah.
One more idea, Tamara, before we get into other pieces of change science, is this idea of recognizing that they don't really know why we have to change. And so we might feel it. And we might think, of course, they're reading what I'm reading. Of course, they're talking to the firms I'm talking to. Of course, they've been to the conferences I've been to. No, they haven't. They're not in the same conversations you're in exactly. And so I think there's an assumptiveness sometimes. We come back from, certain we need to change something. And then we just assume everybody should know that. they should get it. And so when they're resisting, we can take it personally, but also be sort of like, wow, you're out of it. Instead of like, hey, I learned something. The idea of information sharing. Hey, I want to share with you. I want to share with you what I've learned. And then I think here's where we need to head.
Yes.
Just to bring them along.
Well, and along that idea of why, because that's exactly where I was when you were talking, was like, that's where we need to start. And when you look at the science of what we've been studying, Roger's adoption process, and we like the questions that he asked that you must be able to answer. And the first one is, why do we need to change? And what will happen if we don't? Like, what's the risk if we don't change and we stay the same? But what will be better when we do make the change? And that should be clearly articulated, written down, because even if you're the change agent, you might forget sometimes and need to be reminded. Because I think we've probably all experienced, why are we doing this again? Who thought this was a good idea? Oh yeah, me. And so we have to really define what that is. And then we can also answer the questions about who else has done it, especially in our, CPA profession. We want to understand, kind of a herd mentality. Who else has tried this? Where can we learn from them? That's where references could come in, but also just to demonstrate it's not been done. It's been done, and we're not going to learn all over again by ourselves. Those lessons learned we can learn from. They also want to know, how hard is it going to be? What's it going to take? And I think that's a place we might minimize it. Chad, I saw your face. And sometimes we minimize that because we want them to, we just want to get it in and get them agreeing to it, get them into the steps, but then they're irritated and frustrated about what it really is going to take. And we can't minimize it. And Jen and I have done a lot of technology implementations. And so, when we're looking at technology implementation with our team, we're like 10 times whatever you're saying it's going to take, at least. Like 10 times long, 10 times more of the steps. We just know it's going to take more because there's things that we didn't anticipate first. And then there's also other implications. Like when we start making these changes, it has a ripple effect. And that's one of the things to think about, is what is the ripple effect going to be? And then, also, how will we know when we got there? And that can tie back to the why, but like, what result, what outcome, what are we going to be looking for, striving for? If we can start to answer those questions, and I'm sure there's, others, but those are good, big questions to start framing yourself. You can use it to position the change that you're wanting to make, but then your team, that you are going to pull together. And when you're doing the planning phase, can look to answer those questions and say what else to be able to identify those. And then we would start to build, this is one of the first communication pieces, is we'd start to build a frequently asked questions document and pop those questions in it at the beginning. And then we can start getting any objections, questions our committee has, questions that we're hearing from other people. As we talk to others that maybe have implemented that change, let's, use our self-service HR system as an example, right? We can talk to other people, what questions did they get, so that we can anticipate them, get the answers, all be on the same page on what the answers are. And then back to Jen, what you said earlier, people can go, oh, they've actually thought through this. Mm-hmm. They've anticipated a lot of the questions that I might have had, and maybe more.
I love all that, Tamera. When you were talking about, people need to trust you in the change, and they'll trust you if you're transparent. They'll trust you if you're honest. They'll trust you if you tell them straight, here's what's going to be better, and here's what's going to be harder along the way, or here's the bumps in the road. I was thinking about these women that I run with regularly, and every once in a while, I try to introduce like a change to a route that we've done forever or something. And when I do that, I always will say, so it's going to be flatter for a while, but then there is this one hill, and it's going to take us about a minute and a half or so to get up the hill. It's pretty steep, then we're going to hit some gravel. I try to tell them what I'm dreaming about doing and the ugly parts, because some of them might not like gravel and some definitely don't like hills. And I don't want to say, let's do this new route, it'll be so great and so much more fun than what we're doing now, and pretend like there's nothing possibly difficult about it. I have to paint the picture of reality, because they'll trust me the next time I want to do a new route. They're not going to think the last time she did that, she nearly killed me and she didn't give me any advance notice or any input to it. And so I think that the more transparent we can be, the straighter about the difficult stuff. And that FAQ you talked about, Tamara, a lot of times people want to make it like a super vanilla FAQ, a super, like, why are we doing it? What will be better when we get there? Yes, you have to say those things, but also like, what if this happens? Then what? This class of client is going to be affected in a negative way. What will we plan to do about that? Who isn't going to be coming along on the change? What will happen if people do not adopt this change? Like, we have to ask the hard questions in the FAQ and answer them straight. And people, when they read those, they're like, wow, they're not hiding anything here.
Right.
And they talked about a lot of yucky stuff in addition to all the cool stuff. And so I can trust this thing a little bit more. I can maybe, and then if you are a regular change agent, they begin to be like, the last time I did it with that person or followed this kind of a change at this firm, they really did all this thinking and planning and communicating, and they, they're going to do it again this next time. I can trust it in the future. And so, this isn't Tamara and Jen just like reeling off these ideas either. All of this is known change management science from Everett Rogers, as Tamara mentioned, Jeffrey Moore in Crossing the Chasm. There's a bunch of different change management sciences. We have summarized a lot of that stuff in a series of articles that Caroline, I'm sure, will share. They're out on blogs and that sort of thing about change communication and change science. But we just see too many leaders inefficiently doing it, just really not effectively doing it. Tamara, I wondered if you might talk for a minute about the power of the pilot.
Yes, one of our favorite words in any change, but also just so we can try some things. And so when we're going to implement a change, and let's just use my HR self-service system as an example again, we want to pilot it. And I might pilot it with a small group, so I don't have to roll it out to the entire firm. You'll have to scale it depending on your firm, but then I could get a group of users that are going to test it, work through, the kinks, whatever. Maybe we're going to pilot it with the entire firm because the nature of whatever it is that we're implementing or the change that we're making, because it has to apply to everybody. But this is a pilot. We're going to do a 6-month pilot, or we're going to do a 90-day pilot. And the reason we like the word pilot is it gives you permission to be able to make some changes, some tweaks. It's not fully baked yet. People can have input and questions and come along. So those that maybe weren't consulted initially about questions can feel like they can have some input too. So it's really beneficial to use a pilot where you can, and use that word pilot. People appreciate it. It'll give you some grace and some freedom when you're implementing change. And I think that's important, for us to consider. So
super critical. It gives you this whole place to stand where it's not expected to be perfect.
Right.
The maximum resistors, the people who are at the furthest point, farthest away from being willing to do this thing, they'll think, oh, well, it's a pilot. I don't have to worry. It'll probably die, somewhere in that testing period. So they get a little less like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And so maybe they'll do a little bit less resistance or undermining because they know that it's going to get, if they're certain it's a bad change, they're pretty certain the pilot will show that. So they have some confidence sort of leaving that be and letting it be a pilot. Although I'd include some of those biggest resistors in my pilot.
For sure.
Like earlier, right? So, and there's all this grace when things don't work. People are expected in the pilot to bubble up feedback, tell us what's not working, give us input. So they're not negative. They're not coming at it like, oh, this is terrible and you guys did a bad job on the change. They're more like, hey, I'm a beta tester here. I'm going to go ahead and, give you this feedback and we'll be refining it. And we hope that good change leaders would refine after the pilot or during the pilot, that we're not just faking the pilot, that we do want feedback. We are going to incorporate that input. We're going to update the FAQ from it. And that brings me to something else, Tamara, just because I'm scared we'll forget to say it. You can do this pilot and you've thought through these conversations and the key communication drivers, and you've answered these questions, you've got a wonderful FAQ, and you're rolling this thing out and you're like, how many times should I communicate about this? And there's a law of 7 in communication that you have to communicate to somebody 7 times, and it has to hit them, by the way, 7 times for it to be assimilated and for them to articulate it back with accuracy. And in
There's
different
bad
ways.
news. There's bad news to that.
In different ways. Because I don't like, I really I want to read. Whatever you have, Jen Wilson wants to read it. Somebody else wants to listen to it in a podcast without any written words and have it all be auditorially transferred to them. Someone else would like to see a table or a flow chart or pictures or images or something. Some of us want video. Some of us love email. Some of us, would like a Pony Express letter delivered, or a message in a bottle. I don't know. And there's so many different preferences on communication.
140 character text.
Yeah. and then I have to actually be there. So I have to be reading my email. It can't go to spam. I have to have been at the company meeting when it was rolled out. I have to have gotten that version of the employee handbook, which might not be the one that I got. There's all this missed communication. And so if people aren't coming along, that's a place to look. Did we roll it out one time and then be like, I don't get why our adoption's only 30%. We saw that with client portals. It was nuts. Many firms wrote like 3 and 4 page letters with all kinds of technical instructions. So it was too complex to understand. And then they sent out one letter. It was a paper letter mailed. Who knows who opened it or who got it or who read it, but one time does not cause adoption. And that one form of communication can't work for everybody either. So as change communicators, it's okay to kind of go berserk and communicate it in different ways, do a TikTok video, do different things to get it across to people, reach them in different ways. And not all at once, by the way,
No,
not
over time.
Not scorched earth all at once, but over time.
But I might, Jen, do a live thing, and then I might put it in writing, and then I might give them their FAQ. Yes. And that might be in a pretty fast succession. But then over time, we have to say who attended, who received it, did they open it? We have to look at that. And Jen, you didn't say the bad news of the law of 7 is they only get half of it. So it's really 14. We think it's probably more than that, but that we have to, message that. So, and I think on the idea of communications, more is better, more is necessary, but also think about what your message is. This idea of cascade of communications that we all were probably taught somewhere in a communications course that we took. And we have to say, who needs to know what message? If I'm trying to get the buy-in from the partners, they're going to have a specific message. If I'm trying to get, buy-in from, managers and staff to use this portal for one thing, there's a financial message to the partners. How much is this investment and what's the return on the investment? Maybe there's, it frees up time for my HR staff to be able to work on other things. We wouldn't say reduce staff, by the way. We would say it frees up your staff because there's a whole list of things and, hit some pain points that they want you to get done in HR to be able to say that. I might not be saying that to my staff who I'm trying to get to use it. That's a different message. So who are the different stakeholders that are involved and what are the different messages? And then you could think about what are the questions they're going to have. That's going to go on the FAQ. I might have a couple of versions of it depending on what the change is. If we're doing an M&A, FAQ and, that change, I'm going to have an internal one and an external one, for example. I might have a leader one, an all staff one, and a client one. But, think about those messages, and that's how we would outline it. And who needs to know what, and then when, where you were just a minute ago, Jen, is not all at once. What messages do they need, over time to come along?
Last idea, Tamera, is this is so missing in change communications, and it's bizarre. When I say it, you're all going to go, that's not missing. And then go back and read some of the stuff that you guys have put out. We see it missing all the time, and we edit each other's stuff and we're like, hey, where's the call to action? What is the specific thing you're telling these people to do, when and how? Right. Got to have a call to action. Yes. And it has to be clear, and it can't be buried, and it can't be on page 4. And so, what am I supposed to do now with this information? That's got to be there too. Now, Tamera will work with Caroline, and we will figure out which articles to link to. We also have the change communications form.
I was thinking the same thing. We will absolutely include that. Yes.
Yeah, we would like you to access that these are all free. We're not trying to charge you for them. We're anxious to drive all this change with you. And we're just trying to link arms with you and have us all do a better job so we can move more efficiently through this change. It's amazing when we do. And we have a lot of change facing us. So we have to get good at it. We have to own that as leaders. My job is to inspire and influence change and to do it in a way that has people jump over that crack or that ditch over to this side where the change lives as soon and as quickly as I could get them there so we could turn around and face the next part of the journey that's going to have some more jumps to make.
Right.
So I love that that you've tuned in today to listen to us talk about this conversation, and we'd love your thoughts on it and any examples you have of things that have really worked in the past. Share them in social, share them with the people listening. That'd be awesome.
Yes. And share this HR huddle with other members of your team so that you guys can get really good at driving change, and let us know what questions you have. We'll include the tools, and we will be off next week for Labor Day, but we'll see you the following week in September. And we hope you have a great rest of your summer and good holiday weekend. So thank you very much. Bye.